To set the tone, I always hated the town I lived in. I moved there alone when I was 18 for college, and quickly regretted it. It was a decent-sized town, but full of not decent people. Nearly every gas station was robbed frequently. There were shootings in broad daylight, robberies, you name it. Well, for the first 3 years I lived with roommates on a side of town that wasn't too awful, but it was sketchy. So when I was making decent enough money, I moved out on my own. The house was tiny, maybe 500 square feet, if that, super old and poorly built. It was just me living there, so I didn't really mind how small it was, but what originally sold me was that it was in the middle of nowhere. It was surrounded by a bunch of fields and some wooded areas with only a few houses nearby. Considering I hated being in the town due to the continuous paranoia of getting mugged or shot, I loved the idea of living out there. So at the beginning of July, I moved in. Everything seemed super swell, minus not being able to get good internet. A month goes by and everything is still pretty swell to me, so I decided to get a dog to keep me company. He also loved the place, and spent long amounts of time lounging about the yard and trying to convince the nearest neighbor to walk over and pet him. Important later. Roughly 2 months into living there, I started to notice things out of place. Something to note is that an old roommate of mine was using my spare room as a storage space until he got moved in himself, so he had a key but was never there. He just kinda popped in every other week to grab something, and usually let me know beforehand. But I'd come home to my kitchen chair being pulled away from my table, or a bowl in the sink. Small things like that. They were such small things that I wrote it off as my roommate swinging by or just stuff that I was forgetting. But then my dog developed this crazy bad separation anxiety. Up until now, he didn't even care when I left. He'd just lay on the couch and chew his toys. He never barked, never did anything weird. However, all of a sudden he began acting really awful every time I tried to leave. He'd literally cram his body through the door as I was closing it, screaming and barking, and wouldn't stop until I came back in the house. He didn't want me to leave him there alone, at all. I couldn't afford a kennel for him, so I decided one day that I'd put in a movie while I was out, thinking maybe the sound of people talking might keep him calmed down. I only had to finish one task up at work and knew I'd be home early, so I put in a copy of Hamlet. I know, boring, but I chose it because the copy I have is 5 hours long. I knew it would still be playing when I came back. Flash forward 3 hours. Long before Hamlet should have been over, but when I walked in the door, not only was the movie not playing, but the TV and the Xbox were completely off. I immediately called my roommate and asked if he'd been over, but he wasn't even in town. I explained the TV situation to him, and he shrugged it off as the TV powering off when it idles for a while. Even though this is true, there are several reasons I know this isn't the case. It wasn't idling. A 5-hour movie was supposed to be playing, and even if it had shut off, my Xbox wouldn't have. I've left it on by accident for weeks while I was gone out of town or whatever, and it was still on when I came home. But it was completely powered down this time. The weird thing is, none of my stuff was missing, and the door was locked when I entered. I eventually convinced myself that it was something weird with the Xbox or whatever, and shrugged it off. That is, until my dog started acting even weirder. Remember earlier I mentioned he used to play with the neighbor? Well, all of a sudden, if she even walked by the house while he was out, he'd start yelping and running at me to get away from her. This was incredibly weird to me, and made me incredibly suspicious of her. I put some cheap alarms on my doors, the kind that go off when the door is opened, and slept with my pistol handy. The second night the alarms were armed on my doors, I was woken up by one on the back door going off. I flew out of bed with my pistol, trying to convince myself that I was about to shoot some intruder. But once I got to the door, it was shut, and there was nobody there. The alarm had been knocked all the way across the room. The door would have had to been open for it to be chucked like that. It couldn't have fallen off and landed there. Something else weird. The door was locked, but not the way I had locked it. I always locked the knob and the deadbolt, but upon checking my lock after this, only the doorknob was locked. The police wouldn't do much as I had no witnesses, no lead, and they didn't have much to go on. Needless to say, I changed the locks. I didn't have any noticeable problems inside after that, but later found out that the close neighbor that my dog hated had previously lived in the house I was renting, and the locks had never been changed. I have no way to prove my theory, but it's pretty obvious she had a key and was coming and going as she pleased. Why though, I can't figure out. Nothing of mine ever went missing. The most unsettling part for me, though, is that she had tried to come in at night until the alarm scared her off. How many times had she been in my house at night while I was asleep, and why? I'm a 28-year-old male, but when this happened I was about 23. I worked at a mom-and-pop's pizza shop in a place in Northern California. It's a small farm town and has a few suburbs near it. I kind of did everything since I knew the family. They trusted me with running things while they were gone. This night, though, I was working deliveries and got the weirdest one of my life. Everything seemed fine when I took the order. The lady ordered anchovies on her pizza, and I always think people who order that are weird as shit. She made a point to tell me the pizza had to be hot when it got there, or she wouldn't pay for it. So I get the pizza and throw it in the warmer, and drive to her house before any of my other deliveries. I'd like to tell you guys that her house was creepy and run down, but it looked like your average one-story new housing development home. I rang the doorbell and put on my fake-ass customer service smile. You all know what I'm talking about. And as soon as she opens the door, I knew this was going to be bad. The haggard old lady who looked like she was a smoker of 50+ years looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It had better be hot, or I'm not paying like I told you over the damn phone." Now, I understand, ma'am. I made sure to stop by your place first, even though it was last on my list. "Bring it in and set it on the table." She said this. And now, I don't normally go inside customers' homes because I read too many stories on no sleep and let's not meet. But at this point, I'm just wanting to kill her with kindness and see where this will go. So I say, "No problem. I also brought cheese and ranch for you if you need it." As soon as I opened the bag, she grabbed the box, and her hand was on the bottom of it, just rubbing it. "It's not hot enough. You fuckers do this every time, and I'm not paying for this shit. Not a single dime." One thing I have an issue with is my mouth. I don't know when to just shut up and try to understand where people are coming from. "Look, lady, your house is a 5-minute drive from our shop, and I stopped by your place first. There's no way your pizza is cold. If you refuse to pay, you're going to be 86th, and I'll notate it on your account." She immediately walked into her kitchen and came back out. She had an old pizza from a few weeks prior she had ordered from us, and threw it at me. "Take your fucking pizza and get out of my house. You're the devil." She yelled that at me and kept calling me Satan and the devil. Again, my mouth has no filter and I can't control it. I try, but I fail every time. As I'm closing the bag and laughing about how much I hate my job, I tell her, "Alright, ma'am, you will not be able to order pizza from us again. I hope you have a good day, and God bless you and your house." She kept following me outside to my car, screaming about how I was the fucking devil. And there are families out there just watching this all go down. I get in my car and start driving. Once I'm back, I tell my manager what happened, and she told me that the lady had already called in and screamed to her about what had gone down. Her story was that I cussed her out and got her order wrong. My manager shut her down and said I'd never do anything like that. But here's the weird part. She whispered into the phone to my manager and repeated, "Send him back. Send him back. Send him back." She called once a day for almost 3 months, just whispering this to whoever answered. She started driving by the restaurant and yelling, "The devil works here. You're all going to hell. Now, I wasn't scared. I was just pissed and wanted to retaliate, because I can't tell you how many times she tried to follow me back to my apartment when I got off work. One night I pulled over and got out just for her to stop her car on the road with her lights on, yelling, "The devil is here." After this, I jumped back in my car and sped off. Luckily, after 6 months of dealing with this lady, I found out she was schizophrenic and bipolar and hadn't been on her meds. Her daughter put her in a care home, but when she was cleaning out her house, she saw that her mom had pictures of me all over her bedroom wall with the word, yep, you guessed it, devil, scrawled all over it. She found me and explained everything to me, and thankfully, that was the end of it all. Okay, so I grew up in a little foresty town along a highway, up in the northwest with my mother, little sister, and stepdad. It's an older miner town nestled up in the foothills. My mom decided we would live in this 150-year-old historical home, built by some coffin maker during the gold rush. I remember it had a neat little door that led to the porch, which he apparently used to slide out coffins he had made. Anyway, the place was pretty beat up from years without care, and it needed some serious renovation. So our first year out there, we lived in a tiny trailer on the hill behind the house, which was a bit of an eyesore, and probably was related to why this person hated us so much. Sometime after we settled in and got to work on the house, we met our first neighbor, Anne. Anne was a middle-aged lady who lived in the house next to ours, with her painfully quiet husband and dog that she forced to wear a shock collar. She was incredibly proud of her position as the neighborhood watch. At first, she seemed nice enough, but things started to get weird after we met our second neighbor, John. He was a cool guy who would do backhoe work on our property for free. For some reason, though, Anne had this weird vendetta against John, and he said on several occasions he had caught her rooting around in his trash cans, probably looking for something to hold against him. She would also apparently call the cops on him over nothing with such regularity that the police knew the situation between them and would basically do nothing. At first, we weren't sure we believed him completely, because he seemed so nice, but we definitely do now. Somehow she found out we had been talking to this guy, and I guess that put some kind of black mark on us. We started finding our trash cans turned over, with the bags broken open. At first, we thought it was raccoons, but soon we realized that it was her. I can't exactly remember how because it was so long ago, but I think someone caught her and told us about it. Then she started slowly driving by our house pretty much every day, and if my little sister and I were outside, she would stop her car and ask us about our mother, who I think she hated most out of all of us. She would also stand out on her hill and stop whatever she was doing up there to stare at my friends and me whenever we walked by. I remember it used to really scare them, because she would just freeze and look at us unblinkingly as we passed. Eventually, she started calling various government facilities on us for various fictional problems. She claimed she could smell raw sewage coming from our property on various occasions, and she also liked to call animal control and accuse us of abusing our dogs. Of course, none of that was ever true, so we never got in any real trouble. I also remember several people around town accused her of stealing and giving away their pets for some reason. I don't know if that was really true, but I thought it was worth mentioning. But I think the worst thing she did to us was after we finally moved into the house. We had 3 dogs at the time, a really big sheepdog, a golden retriever, and a little black mutt. We kept them in the large chicken wire pen in the yard when we weren't walking them, so they wouldn't run into the busy highway. Well, for some reason, they started getting out every few nights, and my stepdad had to wrangle them before they ran into the road. We couldn't figure out how they were doing it for the life of us. Until one night, when my mom, my little sister, and I were upstairs in the bathroom, brushing our teeth. My mom happened to look out the window and saw a dark figure fiddling with the lock on our fence. She quickly opened the window and yelled out that she had a gun and threatened to kill them, we saw the figure run and begin to clamber up the hill. She ran outside and saw them run up onto Annie's property. She ran outside and saw them run up onto Anne's property and heard a door open and close. I must reiterate, we lived very close to a busy highway. Our dogs could have died. My mom did end up reporting this to the police, but they said there was nothing they could do since she had no proof. I don't know if that's actually the case, but our police department is pretty corrupt, so they probably wouldn't do anything even if they could. Anne did end up getting kicked out of the neighborhood watch for the various reports of trespassing surrounding her. The last really odd thing I remember her doing was spreading a rumor that my then pregnant mother was running a weed empire from our backyard. I think she wanted to be the CSI of buttfuck nowhere or something, but she was completely delusional. This happened to me a month ago. The night before this happened, I was talking to my friend about going to this abandoned mental ward that's on the outskirts of a military town in California. I had been there before with one other friend, but we'd never gone too far in. The way to get in was through a hole that you had to crawl through in a boarded-up door, connecting to the basement of the building. I took the bus to the outskirts of the town, and we met up with my other friend to go with them. For the record, I'm a male, and my friend is a short female. For the story, we'll call her Kay. When we arrived, we found out that the hole to get in was boarded off, but I told Kay that I knew of another way to get in. This building is insanely massive, and also a complete maze. We found a way to get in, but the only problem was you have to dangerously climb a wall. Kay was reluctant to climb and a little scared. Rightfully so. I climbed up first, and found myself in a small quad area that had overgrown plants that I had previously seen from the last time. Kay didn't want to go up, but eventually she made it. We weren't inside quite yet, so we began looking for a way in, and eventually I found a very sketchy piece of plywood board that was used by someone to bridge a gap that was around a 12-foot drop into broken glass and wood. The only thing that was holding up the board was a 2x4, and at the end of the board was a bucket and a ledge where you could climb up into a window. I climbed up after almost falling, and made my way into a dark room with only a desk. The walls of the room had been painted with weird tags, quotes, and been smashed and torn up by who knows what. Kay didn't want to go up yet again, and after 15 minutes of making up her mind, she won and stayed behind. So now it was just me in this building. I walked around the second floor, scouting things out with a flashlight, and making my presence known to any squatters. I pulled out a can of spray paint, and started to play some music to put myself in a calm mood. I started painting, and came across really creepy and downright scary words painted on some of the walls. I made my way down to the basement, where I found a room with the words painted on the door. 2 died here, and a bunch of words saying Mars Trap, and a room with the word kill. I also found what looked like a noose on the ground with the top part of it connected to a broken piece of the ceiling. The whole time I kept hearing small noises. I played them off as things falling apart, because this building literally looked like the set of a horror movie. But as I went on, I started to feel the overwhelming vibe of the building come over me as I smelt cigarettes and noticed that a door I had seen the last time I went was knocked over. I got lost a little and found my way back to Kay, but she wasn't there. I assumed she went back to the entrance, so I decided to make my trip shorter so I wouldn't waste her time. I went to the basement of the building, but I didn't really want to stay down there anymore because it smelled toxic and was darker than pitch, so I made my way to the 3rd floor feeling a little more anxious every minute. Complete fear and dread poured over me when I heard multiple voices and sounds coming from the basement. Words can't describe what it feels like to be trapped in an abandoned building, by yourself with no reception, lost, and there are people in the basement. I felt sick knowing that there were multiple people in that basement while I was down there previously, unable to see them. I started to freak out, and by the luck of the earth I found a heavy metal pipe that I could use for protection. I wanted to yell for Kay to help or do something, but I didn't want to give out my location. I felt like crying, but I remembered that there was a laundry shaft that connected to an alternate staircase. I quietly walked to the staircase, and I heard them conversing quietly. I heard them arguing. I found the shaft, but I was still completely lost and dreading the fact that there's only one way in and out of this place. After frantic searching, I finally found the dark staircase. At this point, I turned my flashlight off and was in the dark. As I was walking down a wide hallway with the main staircase to my left, I started to smell a metallic aroma. For God knows what reason, I looked to my left and saw 3 figures walking halfway up the stairs. I blurted out, "Oh fuck," and began to run for my life. I heard them running full speed after me, screeching incoherent words. After what felt like the worst 6 seconds of running, I flung myself out the window and broke the board, but somehow cleared it without falling into the ditch. I climbed carefully down the wall I had gone up. I had been there for maybe 15 or 20 minutes total, so I wasn't keeping Kay waiting, but this experience was really something. I didn't get a good look at those people, but there were 3 of them, and they were all males and dressed what looked like black clothes and a black skirt type thing. By the time I had gotten out, the sun was already going down, and I told Kay all about it. I'm so glad I randomly decided to look to the left while crossing the main staircase. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.